Resourceful Designer, episode 156, Building Loyalty with Your Design Clients.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He wanted to be a helicopter pilot when he was younger. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you've plugged me in your ears today as you join me in the hopes of improving your design business. In today's episode, I'm going to share my secret to building loyal clients that keep coming back. I also have a resource of the week to help you with accessibility compliance before ending with a question from Scott about justifying your prices. Now, before I get to any of that, I just want to give a big thank you to the great feedback I received from last week's episode where I had Tom Ross from Design Cuts on the show to talk about creating and selling digital resources to supplement your design business. Now, I had a lot of people reach out to me and tell me how much they liked that episode. And the general consensus is they liked it wasn't an interview to learn more about the guest, but instead, the guest, Tom in this case, was here to share knowledge that is useful to you, my listener. Now, if you like that format, you'll be happy to hear that there's going to be more of that in the future. I'm currently in the process of lining up some other guests for topics that I'm not as experienced with. Now, the format for the podcast won't be changing. It's just that sometimes it'll be more than just me that you're listening to. Now, I just came back from Orlando, Florida, where I was at a podcast conference, Podfest Multimedia Expo. And the reason I went down there was not only to meet some of my podcasting friends, was to launch my new side gig, if you will. In the last few episodes, I've been teasing you on a side project that I've been working on. Well, now I can announce that what I've launched is a new website called podcastbranding.co. You can go check it out if you'd like. It's a niche site I developed in order to target the podcast industry. You've heard me over the years talking whenever I talk about what I've been up to this week. Oftentimes I'll talk about doing podcast artwork. Well, it's always been, Mark's a graphic designer, he can do podcast artwork for you. And that's the way I've been doing it. Great word of mouth, it's been really well. But I never actually targeted that niche. And I finally decided that now's the time. So I launched podcastbranding.co. And I went down to this podcast conference in order to help promote that business, to get the word out that not only is Mark a good graphic designer and he can do your work for you, but Mark actually runs a company that specializes in visual branding for podcasters. So now that I'm back from the event, I can tell you that, first of all, the reception was really good. A lot of people seem very interested. But what I'm really excited to share with you is, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard me mention how when I first started my business, I wore a t-shirt that said, "I'm a designer, let's talk," and how it got me a lot of business. Well, I put my money where my mouth is, and I had some t-shirts made specifically for this event. It had my logo on the front of it, and on the back, I said, "I create visual identities for podcasts. Let's talk." And you know what? It still works. The first night I was there at the conference, we had this big get-together at another venue. It was off-site, but they bussed us all over to this really fun get-together. And while I was there, multiple people tapped me on the shoulder and says, "Can you tell me what this means on the back of your t-shirt?" And I explained it to them, and they were very interested. I handed out some business cards to them. And when I got back home, there was a few orders in my inbox, so it did work. And that was just at that one event on the first night. Throughout the weekend, I had the shirt on every day. I had 3 different shirts. I actually ordered 4 t-shirts just in case. I had a black one, a navy blue one, a white one, and a yellow one. I never did wear the black one. I wore the blue, the white, and then the yellow. I just didn't want people to think I was wearing the same shirt every single day. But the message exactly the same on all of them. And throughout the weekend, I had lots of people come up to me and says, "Could you explain that on your shirt?" Or "I have a podcast. When you say visual identities, does that mean the artwork, the website?" And I explained that it's the whole bit. So I'm happy to say that the whole t-shirt as a marketing means still works today. And I knew it did. I've received emails with some photos from listeners of the podcast who have told me that they've created their own shirts after hearing my story and how it's working for them. So I was happy to hear from them, and I was happy to give it a try myself as I'm starting this little side gig here for podcast branding. And just let you know that if you want to give it a try, go for it. It's very inexpensive to create a t-shirt, and even if it gets you one client, it was well worth it. So that's what I've been up to. And now, this week's Resource of the Week. Now, this week's resource is a tool I came across that shows you how ADA compliant your colors are in relation to each other. Now, ADA stands for American with Disabilities Act, which means for anybody who's colorblind, this website, you put in your colors and it'll tell you whether it passes the various colorblindness or not. You can put in 2 or multiple colors and it generates a chart that tells you what colors work best together. And if some don't, it'll help you discover what other colors you can possibly use. Now, accessibility is a big thing. There's a lot of countries where it's almost becoming mandatory that when you design something, especially websites, that it has to be accessible. So this is a great website that'll help you with the color side of that. Now, the website is abc.useall5.com. And this is put out by useall5.com, which is a design studio. I believe they're in California. But this is a little resource on their site. So give it a shot, have a look at it, test out some colors, and you'd be surprised at what sort of color combination isn't good for people with color blindness. I mentioned that I just came back from a podcast conference. Well, it was funny. One of the keynote speakers didn't mention my company, but just in his keynote, he was talking about the importance of having a visual brand for your podcast. And it was funny because a lot of people that I'd already talked to were looking at me and smiling because that's exactly the message I was giving. But during his keynote presentation, he showed an example of a podcast cover art that was no good and that they rebranded. And the thing is as soon as he showed the rebrand, he says, see, here's an example of good podcast cover art. My first thought is, no, that's not good podcast cover art because anybody who's colorblind won't be able to read. It was a green text on a blue background, and it looked very good for people with normal vision. But I know that anybody that had a certain color blindness, it would just look like a blank square to them. They wouldn't be able to read the text on it. So even though the keynote speaker was saying that it was an example of well-designed cover art, I know it wasn't. And it actually helped me a lot because while I was talking to people and most people at the event had heard the keynote, I mentioned to them that when he said that was good cover art, it wasn't. And here's why. So if you don't want to be caught in the trap of designing something that a good portion of the population might have trouble seeing, then test out your colors by visiting abc.useall5, and that's spelt out 5, not the number, .com. And now, building loyalty with your design clients. Now, I have to preface today's topic by saying that everything I'm going to share with you today won't help if you're not already a good designer. You don't have to be an amazing designer. Good is good enough. As long as you know what you're doing, then you will benefit from today's episode. Because today, I'm talking about how to build client loyalty in order to keep them coming back to you. And, well, let's just face it. If you're not a good designer, there's not much you can do to get repeat business other than practice and try to get better. But I'm guessing that by the fact that you are here right now listening to me, that you are serious enough about your design business, and therefore, you must know what you're doing when it comes to design. So let's just move on. So the idea here is to build relationships with your clients. Now, I'm not simply talking about designer-client relationships. I'm talking about relationships on a more personal level. I'm not telling you to start dating your clients or taking them out for dinner and all that stuff. Although, I suppose that might work. And although I don't personally have any experience on that front, hey, if it works for you, drop me a line, let me know. I'd love to know what it meant to date your client in order to get more work for them. But what I'm telling you is to get to know your client on a more personal level beyond simply the design project that the two of you are working on together. Now, I did cover some of this way back in episode 20 of the podcast titled Building Relationships with Your Graphic Design Clients. And you can get to that one if you go to resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 20. But that was 3 years ago, so I'll forgive you if you don't remember what I covered in that episode. But you might want to go listen to it after you finish this one. Now, I've been following this principle since I got into the industry 30 years ago. And even more so since I started my own design business in 2005. And I must say, my track record is pretty good. The majority of my clients have become repeat clients. And the majority of those repeat clients keep coming back over and over and over again with multiple jobs over the years. I have a special mailbox. I'm on a Mac and I use Mail for my email program. And I have a special mailbox where I will copy certain, you can call them praise emails that I receive from clients. And I called up a few of them here, and I want to read just a couple of lines from some of these emails. First one here says, "There's nobody else I'd rather work with." Here's another one. "I can't imagine working with anyone else." And then here's one. "I feel like you're part of our company." And this one I really like. "You get me. I don't know how, but you get me." And these are just a few. By the way, if you don't already have a mailbox like this where you keep track of these really good praise or testimonial emails, you really should have one, because it's great to get those emails and think, "I'll just save this one." But chances are you're going to forget about it or lose track or not remember where it is. So create a special mailbox and make a copy of the email and put it in there so that you know that's all that's in that folder. And what's great about this is if you ever have one of those days where you're feeling down, nothing's going right, you can always just open up that mailbox and start reading through those praise messages, as I put them, and it'll really, really pump you up and get your juices flowing again, because you realize that people do really appreciate you. So anyways, little side note there. So how did I develop such client loyalty where they're telling me that there's nobody else they'd rather work with, or they can't imagine working with anybody else? Is it because I'm such an amazing designer? Because I can tell you, I don't personally consider myself an amazing designer. Am I good at what I do? Yeah, I think so. I do consider myself above average, but I wouldn't go so far as to calling myself amazing. No, I've built up this loyalty because of the relationships that I've built with my clients over the years. Think about it. Relationships are usually built on two things: trust and how much you like someone. If you don't trust someone, chances are you won't have a relationship with them. The same if you don't like someone. Chances are you won't have a relationship with them. The trust part is easy when it comes to our business. You do good design work and you deliver it on time. If you do both those things, chances are your clients will end up trusting you, especially if you repeat that. Do good design, deliver on time. That's all it takes, and they will trust you. The other half of the equation is getting them to like you. I want you to think about this. Clients would prefer work with a good designer they like than work with an amazing designer they don't like. Let me repeat that. Clients would prefer work with a good designer they like than work with an amazing designer they don't like. Now, can you please explain that a little bit further, Mark? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here's my strategy for building relationships with my clients and getting them to like me. Are you ready for it? I listen and I take notes. Yep, that's it. Thanks for listening. No, seriously, that's the magic of it. Listening and taking notes. See, the goal is to get the clients to like you. Well, the more you know about your clients and the more they know that you know about them will increase the likelihood of them liking you. Just think about your regular day-to-day activities. When you interact with somebody, the more things they know about you, the more chance you will like interacting with that person. That's the reason when I go to the grocery store, I always look at the name tags of the cashiers. I always call them by name. Hi, Sally. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing? And I talk to them. Just that little bit, knowing their name. It's on their name tag. It's right there. It's easy to read. But just that little bit puts that person in a better mood, and they like me more because of it. Or I presume they do, because they're very polite. Sometimes you'll be standing in line at the grocery store and you see the cashier passing one person after the other and never smiling or anything. They're just doing their job. It's become routine. And all of a sudden you get up and you call them by name, and all of a sudden they're smiling and they're joking with you and that. It's because of that small little building block of a relationship. And as you do this over and over, you go back to the grocery store, you see the same cashier, you greet them by name, you talk to them, and that all the time. They get to know you, and eventually they end up getting to like you. Even though they don't know anything else about you, just that little bit of a relationship is enough for them to like you. And that's what you're trying to do with your clients, but on a bigger scale. So let me elaborate. Whenever a client comes to me for whatever project, whether it's a new project, an old project, a small project, a big project, whatever it is, not only do I want to know about their organization, what I'm going to be designing for, but I want to know about them. I want to know their personal life. I want to know about their family and all that stuff. Now, I don't just go ahead and ask them those questions because that would be almost a little weird, but I build up that knowledge over time through the various conversations I have with the clients. Now, obviously, the longer you have a working relationship with a client, the more they come back, the more you get to learn about them. So how do I do this? Most times I get on a phone call with a client, or if they're not local enough, I can get on a video call. But very rarely will I do a lot of interactions over email. So if it might start via email, but I will often get on a phone call or a video call with the client. And I have a few little tricks that I use. Say a client calls me, I pick up my phone and say, "Hi, Mark here." And the client says, "Hey, Mark, it's Mike. I want to talk to you about a project." The first thing I would do, I say, "Oh, hi, Mike. How are you doing? Hold on a second. Let me call up your files here." So what I'm actually doing is stalling Mike. Now, I might call up the client folder I have on his business if he's a repeat client, or if it's a new client, I'll say, "Let me open up a note document here so I can take notes." But in the process of doing this, what I'm doing is buying time to start asking questions. So while Mike's on the phone and I say, "Give me a second here, let me call up your files," then I'll say, "So Mike, while I'm doing this, did you do anything interesting over the weekend?" Or if it's closer to the end of the week, you'll say, "What do you have planned for the weekend?" And it's just idle chit chat. So Mike will say something like, "Oh, my wife and I went for a drive out in the country." There's one note. Mike's married. He has a wife. And then I take note of that. That's part of it. Listen and take notes. So I take notes. Mike has a wife. "Yeah, we took a drive out to the country and we went to check out the cabin." "Oh, cabin? What cabin?" "Oh, my father has a cabin that we use every summer." "Well, that's interesting. And Mike's father has a cabin that they use." "Oh, where's the cabin?" "Oh, it's up by Lake so-and-so. It's great. We go up there water skiing and do some stuff every summer." Well, that's notes I can take. "Oh, isn't that a lot of fun?" And then we might get into the project and discussing things. Well, now I know a little bit more about Mike. I know that Mike is married, and I know that Mike has a cabin that he goes to in the summer. Now, some other calls might come in and say I'm working on a website for a client, and this is a brand new client. We're talking about a website, and this is a project. It's a big site. I know it'll take several weeks to complete. So I might, in the conversation, I might say, "Well, this is going to take several weeks. It's going to be a lot of back and forth. Are you planning any time off in the next few months?" And that sounds like a very legitimate question. Well, the client might say, no, I'm not going to be taking holidays until August." And then just casually, I would throw in, "Oh, do you already have something planned for August?" And they might tell me, "Well, we've decided to take a trip to Europe," or whatever. That's the sort of information that I will write down. I might be talking with a client. I'll say, "Hey, Sonia, how was your weekend?" "Oh, it was great. We had my daughter's piano recital on the weekend." And I'll say, "Oh, isn't that exciting? How old is she?" "Oh, she's 9 years old. She's still learning, but it was a lot of fun." "Oh, I bet it is. I remember when my kids were that age." And during that conversation, now I know Sonia has a 9-year-old daughter that plays piano. So the idea is to keep all these little notes, these little details about the clients. Every little bit they tell you. It might seem insignificant, but that's the sort of information that can help you build that relationship. That knowledge that you have can make a client like you because you know those things. In a way, I hate to say this, but it's kind of like you're stalking your clients inadvertently. Now, not in a bad way, you're doing it in a good way. Now, what I do myself is all these notes, I'll quickly write them down on a paper, and when I'm done, I will call up my contacts app on my Mac or on my phone. You have an app that's called Contacts that you keep all your phone numbers, emails, and stuff for for anybody that's in your contact list. Well, I will make sure if that client is not already in my contact list, I will add them. But if they are, usually in your contacts, there's a whole list of things where you can put their spouse, you can put their kids' names, you can put birthdays, you can put all, and at the bottom, there's a notes field. Well, I fill in all that information. So I know Mike has a wife. Okay, wife, I'll put in yes. I don't know his wife's name yet, but I know he has a wife, so I'll put in yes next to a wife. Sonia has a daughter. I'll put down that she has a daughter, 9 years old. As of, and I'll put the date that I found out she was 9 years old. Mike has a cottage that he goes to. So in the notes section, I will write, Mike has a cottage on Lake so-and-so. And I will keep track of all this information for my clients. Now, if there's something like a birthday, like if a client's, I asked them, what are your plans for this weekend? Oh, my wife and I are going away. It's our wedding anniversary. Oh, well, that's great. Congratulations. How many years? And then they'll tell me usually. And then I will go in and I'll add that. But not only that, I will then go into my calendar and mark a reoccurring yearly event on my calendar. And I create a separate calendar for client information so that you can easily turn it off if I want to just look at work or personal stuff. So it's a separate calendar for client information. And I will have all these things. So on that date, I will have marked that it's so-and-so's wedding anniversary and they were married in whatever year, so I know how long it is, and that sort of thing. So same thing with birthdays, same thing with special events, all these little things. If somebody's going on a holiday, I'll mark down when they're going on a holiday. If somebody has a special event at work, like I say, this is all personal information, but this could also be work related. If they're going on a business trip, I would write that stuff down. If their company is having a special launch, a product launch at such and such a date, I will write that down, even if it has nothing to do with me. Maybe I'm designing something for one part, but they're going to be busy because they're launching this other thing that I have nothing to do about. I will mark down that they're launching that stuff on such and such a date. And then once I gather all this information, then it's just a matter of using it in the future. So, for example, if I know that a client is going away on holidays, the next time I talk to them, if it's after that date, I can then bring it up. How was your trip to Europe? Or the last time we talked, it was the week before your wedding anniversary. Did you end up doing anything special with your wife? Bring up that sort of thing. Hey, Sonia, how you doing? How's your daughter doing with her piano lessons? It's those little bits that make the client go, oh, Mark knows this thing. Mark listens. Wow, isn't that special? I like Mark. And when somebody likes somebody, there's a much better chance they're going to want to work with them. So I use that information. Sometimes if it's the case of a business launch, even if I had nothing to do with it, I'll follow up with an email after the fact and just say, by the way, I was just thinking about you and I was wondering, how did the launch go? Did everything go okay? Or they went on a business trip or something. How did your business trip go? Just reach out, a quick email. Even if you haven't heard from the client in a while, you found out their son has a birthday in March. Well, the next year, you haven't heard from the client in a while. You might want to send out a message to them and just say, just wanted to touch base, haven't heard from you in a while. Just wanted to see how things were going at work and if you need any of my services. By the way, I'm just thinking, didn't your son just have a birthday recently? Seems to me it was about this time last year that you mentioned him just having a birthday. Anyways, just thinking of you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Signed, Mark. And you would be amazed at how many of those things come back. Wow, I can't believe you remembered it was my son's birthday. That's amazing. Wow. Oh, by the way, yes, I do have something for you. So all these little details. And the more you work with a client, the more you get to know them and the more details. I can call up one client here. This is a client I've had since I started my business. And if I call up my contacts app here and I look through her information, I can tell you that her birthday is in February. Her husband's name is Mike. His birthday is in August. Mike is retired. Mike enjoys golfing. He golfs multiple times a week during the summer. They own a timeshare in Florida that they go to every January. They also own a cabin on a lake about an hour's north of where we live here that they spend a lot of time during the summer. They have a daughter who is a school teacher at a local high school here in town. The daughter's birthday is in July. So this is all information I've gathered. Now, there's a lot more here. I'm not going to read everything about this client, but that's just some of the information I have. Now, that is not stuff that I would just remember off the top of my head. But anytime I know I'm going to talk to that client, or it's so easy when the client, if the phone rings and I see the call display, oh, that client's calling, it's just a quick click to open up my contacts list, type in her name, and there's all the information about her that I can look up as I'm talking to her. So if it's the summer, I could ask, so how's Mike enjoying the golf? Is he getting out a lot, as much as he was last year? Or what's your daughter doing now if school's over for the summer? Is she teaching summer school, or is she taking courses, or what's she up to now during the summer months? And that sort of thing. And that's what builds relationships. So reach out to your clients on special occasions, on birthdays, on events, follow up after things that happen at work, ask them how things went, and all those things. And the more you do, the more the person will say, well, wow, they really care. And if they really care, then I like them for that, and they will bring more work to you. Now, I will share one more trick here. If you follow your clients on Facebook, Facebook is great for showing you when somebody's birthday is. You can go in and see who all the birthdays are coming up in the next few weeks. They will also notify you, usually the day before or the day of, that it's somebody's birthday. But here's a trick. I usually don't go on to Facebook and wish somebody a happy birthday, because I don't know about you, but every year when my birthday comes around, I get people that wish me a happy birthday. And I know that person has not thought about me at all. The only reason they're wishing me a happy birthday is because Facebook told them, oh, it's Mark's birthday today, so they're wishing me a happy birthday. And in a way, for some of those people, they might think, oh, it's nice. Mark's going to think, oh, wow, I'm remembering them. I know darn well they're not remembering me. It's Facebook that's reminding them of me. And in a way, I almost resent is a strong word, but that likeness factor diminishes a little bit because of it. So what I do is I set a reminder. I set up birthdays in my calendar app, as I told you. I set a reminder to remind me a couple of days beforehand. And then I will send an email. I don't reach out on social media. I will send an email out to my client and say something like, I know you've got a birthday coming up in a couple of days. I'm afraid I might end up missing it on the day. So now that I'm thinking about it today, I just want to reach out and wish you a happy birthday before the fact. And you know what? That sort of thing, the person remembers. They won't remember the 50 people who wished them a happy birthday through Facebook, but they will remember the email you sent them 2 or 3 days before their birthday, telling them that they have a birthday. You're thinking about them before the fact, and you're reaching out just in case you miss it because you've got a lot of stuff on your plate, and I'm afraid I might end up missing it, so I thought I'd wish you a happy birthday in advance. That's the sort of thing clients will remember. And when they remember those sort of things, it just builds that trust and that like for you. And as I said earlier, clients would prefer work with a good designer they like than work with an amazing designer they don't like. And when a client really likes you, they don't want to go anywhere else. They would actually feel guilty if they went somewhere else. So that's how you build client loyalty. You do good work, you deliver on time, and then you do whatever it takes to get them to like you. When you can do those 3 things or 2 things, build the trust and build the like, you will have built a loyal client that will be with you for a very, very long time. Now, I would love to know what you thought of this topic. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Did I just blow your mind and you're going to try all sorts of new things now to build client loyalty on your own? Please leave me a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 156. And now this week's question of the week. This week's question comes in from Scott. It says, I love the idea that a design should not be quoted based on time, but how do you come up with a price? And what can you answer when a client asks you for justification for a price? Well, thanks for the question, Scott. And this is a very, very broad question. I mean, you can get 50 designers in a room and ask this question, and you'll get 50 different answers. The best thing I can tell you is you have to come up with a price on your own. And a lot of situations, it truly is just trial and error. I used to build websites based on the hour. If it took me 10 hours to build a website, I built 10 hours times my hourly rate. But then when I started doing more value-based or project-based, then I started coming up with prices. I would say, okay, well, you want a website? It's going to cost you $800 for a website. And then when the client agreed to that readily, the next client, I went, okay. The next client is going to cost you $1,000, then $1,200, then $1,500, then $2,000. And it's just till you find that sweet spot. When you start getting a bunch of clients coming in, and as soon as you tell them it's $2,000, they say yes. If there's no kickback, if there's no hesitation, then you know that your chances are your prices are too low. So then you go up. Okay, the next client, you ask $2,400. If they say yes again, and the next client after that says yes to $2,400, then you move it up again. Maybe it's $3,000. Now, if you get to a point, like say $3,000 for a website, and now clients are starting to hesitate and some of them are saying, I don't know, then you know that you've kind of found your sweet spot, at least for the clients you want to work with. Now, that's, of course, a very general idea because not all websites are worth that much. There's some websites that are worth a lot more and some worth a lot less. But I'm trying to get an idea across here of a ballpark. So when you're looking at pricing, let's say for a logo, for some clients, you can look at what they're doing. If it's a small business that they're just starting on their own and they're going to be running it part-time or whatever, and they need a logo done, you might look at them and say, well, the logo is going to cost you $400. And you just throw that out there. If you think you can do it. Now, don't put out a price that you think you're going to lose money at, but if you think you can do it for $400 and still make a good profit, then go for it. Now, if it's a bigger, like say it's another client that comes to you and they're starting a partnership, a law firm, like 3 partners got together and they're opening this law practice, and you know that they're going to be making it a lot more money than this other business, then there's nothing wrong with going into them and saying, you need a logo? Okay, instead of $400, it's going to be $1,400 for a logo. And sometimes the client will just readily agree and say, that's perfect. Okay, where do I sign? And then you go to yourself, I could have asked for more. So it's really hard. I mean, there's some clients, there's all sorts of formulas you can go, but in reality, there's no way to judge what the value is. When you do value-based pricing, there's no way to judge the true value of a brand. I mean, just look at Nike, the swoosh. They paid, $35 to have that swoosh designed? There was no way at the time that it was designed that anybody would know the value of that swoosh today and how it's worth millions of dollars in brand recognition. So value design is very, very hard to come up with. There's going to be all sorts of people on the internet that'll say, well, here's some formulas, but it all comes down to you having to know how much you estimate it'll be worth to a client. And you try it. And the thing is if you go back to my episode on 3-tiered pricing, which was episode 145, resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 145. And that one there, that is a perfect example of going into a client with multiple pricing. You can say, I will design a logo for you for $1,400. And for that price, here's what I'm going to give you. I'll give you the logo in all your different formats. I will give you a short digital style guide to show you how to use the logos. And I will help you implement and give you some strategy going forward with the logo. Now, if you don't want to spend $1,400, I can do the logo for, let's just throw a price out there, $600. But for $600, all I'm doing is designing a logo and giving it to you. Everything else you have to figure out on your own. And then you can do another one that say for $3,000, I will also design all the implementation. I'll show you exactly what your logo needs to look like on your truck, on your storefront, on your clothing, on your pens. I will design all this stuff for you so that you know that the logo is implemented properly. So when you introduce a 3-tiered system, which is what I've been using lately, and it's really working out, and I've been talking to a lot of other designers who are using it, and it's working out for them as well. It really helps you try to come up with the value, because then you get to see that a client is willing to pay X amount of dollars for something, and they will see the value. They'll say, okay, well, I can spend $1,400 and get this, or $600 and get this. Well, is the extra $800 worth it? And in some cases, it is. The idea is you always try to make the middle one the best deal. So they'll look at it and they'll go, yeah, that's really a good deal. So maybe 6 and 14 might not be a good price break. So maybe $1,400 for the middle one and $1,000 for the small one. So in that case, the client goes, well, for an extra $400, is it worth me getting a style guide and some suggestions on implementation? Some clients, it might be worth it. So they'd be willing to spend that extra price. So coming up with a price is very arbitrary. It depends where you live. It depends on your clients. It depends on so many different things. I hope I helped you with that one. Now, the second part of your question is, how do you answer a client when they ask for justification of your price? Honestly, I don't. If a client asks me and they say, well, how can you justify that price? I don't justify it. I just say that's just the price it is. That's how much it'll cost. And if the client says that, well, I can get it done cheaper somewhere else, I'll just tell the client, it says, well, that's your prerogative. It's your money. You're spending your money. You need to get the best value for your money. And I think that I bring that value, and this is the price of that value. Now, if you can find somebody that's cheaper to do it, just make sure that you are getting the same value for the price. And just that little bit of justification. When I've done that with websites where somebody says, wow, that price is expensive. I can get somebody else to do a website. And I will let them know. I says, that's fine. You can go find somebody else to do a website. You just make sure that this is what you're getting. And I will just itemize that, they'll be able to access it. The website will be secure. They're going to be getting backups of the website. They're going to have it hooked up to analytics and all this stuff. It says, you just make sure that for whatever price you get, you're getting all this value because that's the sort of stuff that I'm bringing you. And sometimes they'll come back to me afterwards and they'll go, I thought your price was too expensive, but now that I've gone around to these other places and started asking them some of the things you told me, I realized that what you are offering me is actually a really good value. So I will justify it in that sense. I will say, if you want to go find it cheaper somewhere else, you can look out for these things. And sometimes you never hear from the client again, and that's fine. If you don't hear from the client again, chances are it wasn't a client you wanted to work with to begin with. But I can tell you, I've had a lot of people say thank you, but no thank you, only to come back later and say, I said no, but, and then I end up working with them. Now, I would never justify the prices by saying, well, it's going to cost me this, or it's going to cost me that, or it's going to spend this amount of time. I will never justify it that way. I will tell somebody when they say, well, why are you more expensive than somebody else? I will tell them because I have 30 years experience. That's what you're paying for. I've been doing this long enough that I know what I'm doing. I know the value. I know what I can bring to you. And that's where my prices are. That's how I justify them. But that's as far as the justification will go. Now, if you're just starting off in the market, then you may not be able to answer that way. And if you are new and you have too many clients asking you to justify your price, it could be that for your position, you may be too expensive. You may need to lower your price a little bit. Now, I say a little bit because you have to make sure that you are getting enough for what you're worth. But if it just so happens that you got too many people questioning your prices, then that may be a sign that your prices are too high for where you are in your career right now. I can charge high prices because of my 30 years experience in the design industry. But if you're only in this 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't expect you to charge the prices that I'm charging. So anyways, I hope that answers your question, Scott. I do appreciate you sending it in. Now, if you would like your question answered in a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit yours. Now, I just want to thank 3 people who left iTunes reviews since the last time I discussed them. We got Nazozi from Singapore, No King 17, and Miss R. Gray from the USA. All 3 of them left me some great 5-star reviews on iTunes. I really do appreciate the kind words. I'm not going to read the reviews out here. But that puts me up to 95 reviews worldwide. I'm only 5 away from 100. So if you would like to leave a review for the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, which will redirect you to the iTunes store in your country where you can leave a review, and I will get notified of it. So thank you very much for listening. Please let your designer friends know about the show. It's available everywhere that podcasts can be found, including on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and so many other platforms, including apps available for both iOS and Android. So if your design friend says, well, I don't listen to podcasts, or I don't know how to subscribe to a podcast, just tell them to download the app. Just search for Resourceful Designer in the app stores. So that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much. Please go out there and start building client loyalty so that you get the longevity out of your clients and they keep coming back for more and more and more and bringing you that business. And be sure to let me know how it works out for you. Until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business. And as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.